Thanks for checking out this demo. I'm a faculty member at an art school, and one of the things we've been doing over the last few years is working to integrate Unreal Engine more into our curriculum. And one of the things we've been doing lately is working with the film department to help integrate Unreal Engine more into the curriculum there. We've been doing things like virtual production, previs, and just general ideas of how we could use Unreal Engine to help film students in their process. One of the cool things that we're able to do is create really quick cinematics and really fast kind of previs ideas to help visualize our stories. So I wanted to go over a couple techniques and demo a few things that we could use in that process. In this demo, we're going to be exploring a few really important ideas. We're going to be importing Rococo motion capture data into Unreal and connecting that to a metahuman. We're also going to be looking at the basics of the sequencer in Unreal. We're going to be looking at the basics of animation in Unreal. We're going to be looking at animating various scene elements to really set our scene up. And then lastly, we're going to be looking at putting it all together with multiple camera cuts. Let's take a quick look at the base project that we're going to work toward creating. So let's jump in by taking a quick look at that scene, looking at MetaHuman's control rig, and then lastly, importing and connecting mocap data. All right, let's get down to it. So I wanted to take a second to kind of show you again what we're going to be creating here. We're going to be making a cinematic using some of the animation techniques and tools inside of Unreal Engine 5.5. And we're going to look at creating something we could use for an in-game cinematic. We could use this to render out to a standalone video. And what we're going to do is we're going to create something that looks a little bit something like this. And a lot of these little pieces are placeholders, just because I wanted to get down into the block out and kind of animate some of the elements that I thought I might need. But let's take a look. Let's pop out of the actual camera. So what I'm going to do is down here in my sequence, we'll get into all this. I'm just going to unlock the camera view so that I can see all the different things that are happening here in my sequence. So you can kind of see I have 3 cameras set up. So select the camera, hit F, kind of zoom in on that. You can see I have that camera animated. I have this little guy animated. This is my little robot dude. The door, and then also this lights up and does it. We kind of have a little bit of action going on there. And then the last thing over here, I have this little particle element that is sequenced as well. So let's see how we actually do all of that. So what I want to do is start by creating a brand new sequence. So the way that we would do that is we go to our content browser, and we're going to find our level sequences folder. It's a really good idea to stay organized, especially when you're doing things with cinematics or anything with sequences, because you'll get a lot of different folders going on. There'll be a lot of different things. So stay as organized as possible. So we can create a level sequence a couple different ways. I can go up to the top here to this little clapboard icon and click Add Level Sequence or Add Level Sequence with Shots. With this option here, Add Level Sequence with Shots, it'll create a level sequence with multiple shots in place. So if I were to select on that, you'll get some options here. I can come in and actually tell it how many shots I have, and I can put in another sequence if I have something that I want to duplicate to utilize. Now I'm not going to do that here because I might not know exactly how many different shots I want to use here. The other thing I can do, obviously, is just add a level sequence, but there's an easier way to do that. I find it's just really fast and easy to right-click down in the content browser, go to Cinematics, and simply do this option, which is level sequence. And when I add that in there, there it is. So I'm going to call this one Meta Human Demo _02. And now if I double-click it, you'll see that it opens up and my sequencer is empty, but if you notice, all of the content is still up here in my viewport. And the reason that is because what's happening is Unreal has the level built, the sequencer is going to act independently of that, and it will then take on any assets or any elements that I include down into the sequencer. So let's take a look at that really quick to see how that works. So one of the first things that we want to do is start animating on the metahuman that we have in place. Now I'm going to quickly go through and show you the process. If you have never used a metahuman before, the way that we would import a metahuman into Unreal, we would simply go to Window, come down to the Quixel Bridge option, select that, and it'll open up Quixel Bridge. And in here, you have the option to go to metahumans. Now you will need to sign in with your Epic Games account. And once you do that, you'll be able to create all these various metahumans. And what I have here are these metahuman presets that I could access. So any of these pre-built, I could simply select them and import them into my game. I'm going to use one that I've already pre-built myself. Here is a customized one. If I select it, you'll see that I have a couple options. Over here, I can select the quality that I'll import as. I'm going to use medium just for this demo. This is a little bit lighter. The other thing that I can do is download. So I'll need to download that. And then once I have it downloaded, I can click add. I can also come up here to this little start MHC, which is the MetaHuman creator. And I can actually create and adjust this character and customize it even more. But when I'm happy with everything, I can simply click add and add it to the game. Now there's one more thing that we want to make sure that we're doing with our metahuman before we really get into animating. We can do this later, but we want to kind of make sure we do it so we remember that we did it. So we're going to look at the LOD settings on our metahuman. The way we do that is we can access the metahuman in the outliner and simply go to the Edit BP. And when we do that, it'll open up the blueprint for that particular metahuman. And if you look on the left-hand side, you'll see all the way down at the bottom a little option called LOD Sync. If I select that, you'll see if I scroll over here to the right-hand side, you'll see an option that says Forced LOD. And what we actually want to do is change that from -1, which will actually allow that to change based on different settings or different distances from camera, things like that. We're going to set that to 0, which will force it to be the top quality, the highest quality. So once we've done that, I can simply hit compile and save and close this up, kind of done with that for now. So once I've done that, I can really start to animate or look at how we might start animating on this metahuman. So the way that I can do that is I can select the metahuman and I'm going to simply drag it down into my sequence timeline. And right off the bat, I have something in here that will allow me to animate. So if I hit F on the keyboard, select the character here in the viewport and hit F, I can frame that up. There we go. That's what I wanted to do. And now what I could do is if I wanted to come in here and actually animate this character, the metahuman itself already comes pre-packaged with this awesome control rig. And I could grab any of these control points. So let's say I wanted to grab the head control point, and let's say rotate that. I could grab that, rotate it around, and actually start to animate this character really easily right here in the engine. So in order to do this, let's say I wanted to animate that and actually have some sequencing going on. I can come down to my sequencer and hit S on the keyboard, and that'll put it in a keyframe. And then if I move it again, you'll notice that it automatically put in a keyframe for me. Now, the reason it's doing that is because I have my create a key when channels properties are changed. If I turn that off, then I scroll down a little bit, and then I move this again, you'll notice it doesn't create another key for me. So that's an important distinction here. If I want to auto key, I can turn this on, make sure that's blue, and then anytime I move, boom, it'll automatically add in a key. So the cool thing about this is obviously if I wanted to, I could come in here and adjust any of these various elements that I have going on here. So I have my character move. I could take my feet, let's say, pull this up. You'll see that it has a full IK rig attached here, which is pretty darn awesome. So again, using this method, I could easily come in and animate. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to import some animation that I've created in Rococo Studio. And for reference, let me show you what that's going to look like when I export something from Rococo Studio. Okay, so here I am in Rococo Studio, and I'm actually going to come in here and export this motion captured clip. So I'm kind of scrubbing through that, but you can kind of see what's going on. I'm very interested in this moment here where my character is sitting down, kind of looking around, and does that little bit of hand movement there. And I'm actually going to edit that out later, but this is sort of what I want to get. So in Rococo Studio, it's really easy to export this. All I need to do is select my clip, come over to the export tabs, and then in Rococo, there is a new setting here, which actually gives me the ability to export for the Unreal Engine 5 Mani. And that's what I'm going to use. So what I'm going to do is find a location to save my clip, and then I am simply going to export that. I'm going to pause this and we'll come back and take a look at that. Okay, so I have exported that clip from Rococo Studio. Now what I'm going to do is import that here and connect it up to my character. So let's go into my content browser, pop back in here, and I already have some clips in here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to import a new one. So I'm going to make a new folder in here and call this new Rococo import. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to right click in that folder and go to import to game. And I'm going to look for that file, and that's exactly what I want right there, that LilySit UE5, which came out of Rococo Studio. Go ahead and hit open. And I'm going to make sure a couple settings are ticked on here. So the main important one that I want to make sure that I have selected here is under the skeleton. So right here, I want to make sure that this is going to be set to the SK mannequin skeleton. That's the UE5 mannequin that we want to use. So the Rococo Studio data is going to be brought in, and then it's going to be connected to this skeleton, which is what I want. That is so that when this animation comes in, this will be able to be used directly on that skeleton without having to retarget anything. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and make sure that import skeletal meshes is turned off. I don't need that. And then down here, I want to make sure that my import animations is ticked on, and then we're all good for that. And I'll go ahead and hit import. And then what should happen here is, there we go. I have this animation imported, and it is directly connected to the UE5 mannequin, and there it is. And it looks exactly like we would expect it to look coming out of Rococo Studio. I do want to mention one important note here. If I were to have gone in and tried to import this animation clip, so I'm actually going to delete that. We'll go ahead and force delete that. That should delete that there. I'm going to try that one more time here. I'm going to import, grab this, hit open. And if for some reason I were to have looked for that skeleton and I did not have the SK mannequin in place, that's okay. I can actually grab that. So let me show you here. If I pop back into my content browser, go to content, I need to make sure that I have the third person content available in order to access that skeleton. Now, if I don't have that, that's simple enough to grab. I can right click and go to add feature or content pack, and I just want to make sure I have this third person template installed so that the skeleton I need will be attached. So I'm going to go ahead and re-import that, and we'll get going to the next step. All right, so let's go ahead and get this popped onto our MetaHuman. So I have that animation imported. I'm going to attach that to my MetaHuman. So let's go see about doing that. So I'm going to go back into my sequencer. And what I want to do here is I'm going to actually try to add that animation to this MetaHuman. Now, one thing I need to do is I need to actually delete this control rig, because if I have that control rig attached while I have other animation sequences applied, nothing will happen. So this control rig will actually take precedence over any of my animation. So we can delete that out of there. We don't need to use that. All right, so now what I'm going to try to do is take this body and add an animation to it. So selecting the body track, I'm going to click on the plus icon here. And under animation, I'm going to look for the Lily sit. Oh, and look at that. There's nothing there. Now, I wanted to show you this because what's happening is you would think that since I have the Lily sit UE5 animation sequence connected to the UE5 mannequin, that it should just automatically connect to the MetaHuman. But in fact, there's one really quick fix for this. This will not see those animation sequences until I actually tell it that the MetaHuman is compatible with the Unreal 5 mannequin. So let's go ahead and select in the outliner. I can select the BP Amelia MetaHuman blueprint, select on the body, and then down here under skeletal mesh, you'll see here, I can double click it. And then now this is going to open up the blueprint or all the different assets for that on a MetaHuman blueprint. And what I want to do is actually want to go to the MetaHuman base skeleton tab at the top here. So this is the skeleton tab. And then I simply need to go to Window, come down to Asset Details, and here where it says Compatible Skeletons, I need to tell it what skeleton it's compatible with. And easy enough, I'm going to grab this, scroll down to the SK mannequin, and that's all I need to do. Now I'm going to go ahead and save this file. I'll do a save all just for right now. Pop back to my sequence, and what I should be able to do here is go to the body track, click on the plus icon, animation, and now there they are. So here are all of my different assets. And this is exactly what I want to do. So I'm going to select the asset that I want to incorporate. And now, right there, there it is. And it is looking good to go. So you might notice that it's a little bit off right now, and that's okay. We'll fix all this. But the important thing is that my asset is in here along with the animation that I want. So this animation sequence now is connected to my MetaHuman. The next thing we're going to do is take a quick second to kind of fix up some of this animation or some of the animation sequence elements and get that laid out a little bit nicer, and then move on to some of the other elements that we're going to start to animate within the sequence. Let's take a look at tweaking our character. First thing I wanted to talk about here was that if you notice, my character looks a little bit odd right now, and I'm doing this to demonstrate something here. So if I have this character, and let's say I import this this animation sequence, and my character is looking a little stretched out or a little funky, what's happening is there might be some issues with my retargeting data. So I went in and kind of turned off the correct settings so that we could see what would happen, so I can fix it here for you. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to access the blueprint, the BP Amelia MetaHuman, and we're going to come down into the skeletal mesh asset again. So make sure I have that selected here. Go into my body, can simply double click, and then that'll open up my my actual skeletal mesh here. So what I want to do is there's two things that I'm going to do. If you don't see the retargeting data here on the side, you're going to click on this little gear, and you're going to click on Show Retargeting Options. And in here, what you're going to do is under Root, well, first off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select, right-click on the root, and I'm going to go down to Recursively Set Translation Retargeting Skeleton. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use on the root, I'm going to go to Animation for my translation retargeting. And then for the pelvis, I'm going to go down to Animation Scaled. So now if I save this, I'm going to go to File, Save All. What should happen is that my root will be activated by the animation. The pelvis will be animation scaled, so everything should scale correctly to the proportions of my MetaHuman. And then all of the rest of this will be skeleton retargeting, so it all should kind of like lock in place, so things shouldn't stretch out real funky and should look pretty good. So let's pop back over to the main here and take a look. And yep, it's looking great. So that actually looks really nice, and everything's kind of fitting in place pretty well. So I think that's working pretty darn good here. Now, one other thing that I want to do is I simply want to kind of scale my character. So right now, as my character kind of walks over and sits down, you'll notice that the scale is pretty off. And there's a couple different things happening here, but right now the character is just too small for my scene. Okay, so because my character's scale was off and position was off, I went through and I did a little fix up on that to show you what that's going to look like now. And look at my character sitting down, sitting in those little boxes, looking real nice. So how did I do that? Well, I could come in here and actually select my different elements, select my body, and let's say just move this around and kind of like eyeball it up and everything. But the thing that I kind of want to do here is make sure that I'm actually working with a transform on this element in the sequencer. And the reason I like to do it that way is because, and you'll notice here my character is now off because I deleted that transform. But if I'm not doing it within the sequencer, I could adjust things over here and make changes. And then if I need to then go do something else, I might have to come back in and add another track on my sequencer and then do it all over again. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to select my BP Amelia layer, track here, and I'm simply going to go into the plus icon and come up and add a transform. And that's going to give me the ability to adjust location and scale. Now, I know that my scale works pretty good at 0.65, so I'm just going to simply pop that into each of these, 0.65. And then my transform, I just need to adjust my Z location, so I'm going to just pull that down right about there and pull that up a little bit more. Just right about there looks good, just so the feet are touching, and off a little tiny bit there, so I think I might actually scale this down a little bit more. So let's do 0.64, and we'll do that to each of these, 0.64, 0.64, and then bring this down just a tiny bit to 87. And that's looking pretty good. And yeah, that actually looks pretty decent there. Might also, for the sake of this demo, just pull that guy over there like that, and that looks okay. So now, if I actually go back here to the beginning, you'll see that this works really, really nicely. And my character's in there and it's looking good. Now, the other thing that I'm going to do on here is I don't actually need the entirety of this animation, right? So if you remember from my example video, I'm just using this little chunk on. So what I'm actually going to do here is I'm simply going to take this animation clip, select it, right click it, go to edit, here where it says trim selection or section left or right. I'm going to trim that section left, and then it just trims that right to that point that I have my character sitting down. So right at the beginning of this track here, I have that element working, and there we go, and it's all good to go. So this is actually enough for me to start to do the rest of my animation. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through and I'm going to start to set this up accurately. So the reason I kind of started this process was because I wanted to actually have something to kind of base the location of where my character needs to go and sit down at. So now that I have that in place, I can actually use this information to create an animation specific sequence. So that is what I'm going to do. So right now, you'll notice I don't have anything else inside of this sequence, and that is perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and then I'm going to pop back over to my content browser and look for my level sequencers. And if I remember correctly, I had that MetaHuman demo was the one that I was just working on. So I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate that. And I'm going to call this Meta Anim Demo. I'm going to use demo for all these so I know that I'm going to connect all those together. The next thing we're going to do is take a look at getting started with the sequencer, talk about shot tracks, and then adding cameras and animating them. So let's go ahead and start to actually nest these sequences together. So what I want to do is I'm going to come over here to my add button. I'm going to click add, and what I want to do is click shot track. And when I add shot track, it's actually going to give me the option to then import other sequences into this sequence. So I'm going to click on the little plus icon, and now what I'm going to look for is the Meta Anim demo and drop that in. And look at that. So now what happens is I have this animation clip, and if I look at what it's doing, it's actually showcasing that animation that I have in the other sequence. It's just importing all right here. Now this is great because I can add other animation sequences in here. I can do all kinds of cool things and kind of like mix these together, have different shots and just kind of like build them up and up and up. But what I'm going to do now is actually start to work with some of the other elements that I have in place. So the next thing I want to do is look at my cameras. So I'm going to clean this up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and select some of my cameras, and I'm just going to hide them. I'm also going to select my little robot character and hide that guy, so I don't need all this stuff in here. So what I want to do though is I actually want to bring in one of the cameras that I have in place. And the first camera that I'm going to bring in is going to be my Cine Camera Actor, just my #1 Cine Camera Actor. If you don't know how to add a camera, it's really easy to do. You simply come over to the Place Actors tab, select that, and then you can come down to the Cine tab, and then right here you'll have Cine Camera Actor. Simply drag it over into your shot. There it is. You'll see it's in place, and I can move that around, and it's active inside of my outliner. Now I'm going to delete that one, because I've already set up a few other cameras here that are going to actually function the way I want them to function. So in this particular sequence, I have a Cine Camera Actor, and I've already gone through and set the settings the way I like, set them up so that they're actually using the actual camera settings for exposure and things like that. So I'm happy with the way that looks, but I want to animate it. So how would I actually go about animating this camera? Really easy. All I have to do is grab the Cine Camera Actor and drag it down and drop it. And as soon as I do that, what you're going to see, and pull this up above it, what you're going to see is the Cine Camera Actor gets dropped in, and I'm able to start animating this. Now, one thing that you're going to also notice here is in this particular instance, I do not have a camera cut track yet, and I'm going to get to that in a second, but it's because I only have one camera active right now, so I don't need that, but I will in a minute. So what we're going to do here is we're going to actually grab this camera component, and under the transform, this is where I can actually come in and start to animate location, rotation, and scale. So the first thing I want to do though is I want to set this up so that I can actually get into a little bit a better position to start animating. So I'm going to go under this the three little line tab here, which is going to give me some options for my viewport. And I'm going to come down to my layouts, and I'm going to go to 2 panes, because what I actually want to see here is one pane that will be active with my camera. So the actual camera that I'm going to be using, so click on Cine Camera Actor here. So if I want to see the camera that I'm looking at, I'm going to grab under perspective here. I'm going to drop that down and go to Cine Camera Actor to activate that particular camera. So now that I have that camera active, and I want to also make sure that under the viewport options, I have Allow Cinematic Control turned on here. What I can actually do is pilot that Cine Camera Actor. So this is great because this really allows me to grab this camera and get to a position where I'm very happy with the shot, and kind of maneuver that camera around. And I'm holding Alt on the keyboard and clicking and dragging. And I can also just simply left click and kind of pan my camera around. And if I'm left clicking and holding, I can push in and out. And what you're going to see here is that in this pane, when I'm moving the camera, it's actually active over here, and you can see the placement of the camera. I can also come over here, and with this pane, this is why we do this, I can go to perspective view. So I want to stay in perspective, default viewport, and then I'm also going to drop into my panel here and make sure Allow Cinematic Control is turned off. And now I can simply click this and move it, and you'll see that as it updates, I'm going to turn real time back on over here, you'll actually see what that camera is doing if I'm selecting and moving here. So I'm going to actually go ahead and animate that. So let's animate a little camera dolly shot. So we'll go ahead and we'll start maybe even back here a little bit. So if you notice down here in my sequencer, I have this little green line and a red line. This is sort of my active area. So anything inside of those areas is kind of like my active animations. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to animate a little bit before the green line so that I have a ease in on my camera, so it's not just like an abrupt start of the motion. So I'm going to select the transform down here and hit enter on the keyboard, and you'll notice that it put in some keys for that. And then I'm going to simply scroll down my timeline a little bit. Oh, something like this, like it. Select the camera in here, and now I can just grab it and move it. And watch this. It automatically updates and adds keys. The reason that's doing that is because I have this button clicked here, which is going to automatically add keys to anything that I'm animating or anything that's moving. So now if I were to play this, there we go. And you can see that shot is doing exactly what I would like it to do. Now, again, there might be some other things that are happening here. I don't exactly love just the simple push on that. So it's super easy. I'm just going to come over here and holding Alt, kind of position my camera where I want it to go. You can also kind of go back and forth on this. And what I should see is a nice little animation like that. I like that a little bit better. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to time that out a little bit more, pull these keys out, just make it a little slower. And now this is my updated active shot, and it's rocking and rolling. So that's a real quick intro to animating the camera. The next step will be adding a few more elements and really honing and tweaking this shot. The next step is going to be animating various scene elements to really start to bring some life to my sequence. Okay, let's take a look at adding a couple different elements here and getting to a little bit more animation inside of my sequence here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add back in that little robot character I had. Now again, this is a placeholder. The cool thing about this is once I have my animation in place, it's just a simple static mesh. I could easily bring in a different static mesh. I could replace the actual static mesh on this component, or I could just use this as a placeholder and just drop it in here and kind of parent the new mesh to this, and it'll work perfectly well. But what I want to do here is take this little guy and drag him down and simply drop him into my sequence. And there he is. So now, right off the bat, I have a transform that I can work with. And that's all I'm going to do on this. I'm just going to simply animate this little character moving around my scene. Now, you'll notice I can't see him too well here, so that might lead me to kind of change my initial camera shot, and that's fine. But I'm going to get this all kind of blocked out first. So now in this particular instance, I'm going to pull this over a little bit because I don't really necessarily need to see my camera shot. But what I'm going to do here is just get my animation for this looking really nice. Hit F on the keyboard to frame that up. And really quickly, I'm going to disable all screen messages. There we go. And I'm going to pop in here and let's go ahead and animate this. So one of the things that I had going on with this shot was my little character here, my Amelia character, kind of tries to grab at the robot at some point. Now, I don't know if I love that. That's fine. I'm just going to kind of use that for a reference. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that as my character kind of comes through here, that the robot kind of passes through right at that point. So right about there, I know my character needs to be kind of in this location. So I'm going to leave my time indicator right where it's at so that I have a decent sense of where that animation needs to happen. Under location, again, select the transform on this, hit enter to add some keys, and I know that's going to be my first kind of like set of points. I'm going to roll down this way a little bit and grab my little character, pull them back, boom. So now I know when this kind of goes through right there. Yep, there we go. The character moves right through there. I'm also going to then kind of position this right through here. So now what should happen is my character will come in, slows a little bit, but look pretty good because my timing here, you notice these keys are relatively evenly spaced. In fact, I'll bet you if I deleted that middle key, yeah, it didn't move very much at all. So there you go. You can kind of see what that's doing. Now, a cool thing that I can do in here as well is just reposition these keys, and I love that. That looks really good. So digging it, and I'm happy with where that's all going. Now again, as I'm going back and forth in here, I'm adding in this little bit of animation. Cool. Pop at the end here. Now, let's see here. I'm going to copy this key, select that key, Control C, scroll down a little bit, Control V, Cool. Can also, if I need to reposition keys, I can hold Control on the keyboard and use my arrow keys to move back and forth, and that'll reposition keys. Looking good. And then I can also just simply use my arrow keys to move my time indicator frame by frame. So that's looking fine there. Now what I want to do on this is have the character kind of stop at this point, hold for a brief moment, and then move again. But I'm going to need my character to rotate so that my character actually kind of moves in the right direction. So how do I do that? Well, I'm going to use a rotation key. So I'm going to open up the rotation. You'll see I have roll, pitch, and yaw, and I'm going to use yaw for this. So what I want to do is I'm going to set a key at the point here where I have a hold. I'm just going to simply click to add a keyframe. So you'll notice on the very first here at 0 and there at 0, and then here you're going to rotate it, say like this. So now I know here at that point rotates this way. And then the next thing that I'm going to do here is as it's rotating here, I'm also going to then want to have the character move again after this key. So if I go in here and I'm going to grab this and have this character start moving, I'm going to grab the red arrow and kind of move that around. You'll notice what happens. It actually makes a little bit of a curved path. And the reason that's happening is because since I'm rotating the character around here and then starting to move it, it's also changing the Y location, which then gives me a little bit of an issue. So really easy way to fix that. I simply have to grab a key here, my first key on my Y. I'm going to copy that and then roll over here and paste it. And now it's going to give that little bit of a sharp, angular, kind of robotic movement, which is what I want. So now moving forward, what I'm going to try to do here is kind of mimic that same kind of process each time. So select both of these keys, copy and paste. You'll notice this is very similar to other linear animation programs. So if you're familiar with something like After Effects or Maya, anything that has the ability to add keys and kind of animate linearly, it's going to give you the same kind of vibe here. So we're going to go in here now and do one more rotation on this. We're going to go to that key here, simply hit S on the keyboard now to add all those keys in there. I'm doing that here simply because I don't really mind that I have these other keys in. If I don't want to do that, I can select the layer and hit enter on the keyboard. So if I just want to add one key to the actual layer or the track that I want to animate, I can simply select it and hit enter, and that's good to go too. So now we're going to come in here, move this a little bit. So I'm going to scroll over to that key, that next key set here, and we'll do the same thing where we just simply rotate my character. And now roll down the line a little bit and move this guy. Boom. And there we go. So now, bop, bop, there we are. So this little character is looking fun, kind of activated and moving around. And I love it. All right, so now let's go ahead and take a look at where we're at. So if we're to scroll through here, you'll see that I have the first shot looking okay. But you'll notice in here as well that as I go by, I'm not seeing that little animation of my character. So one of the things that I might consider doing is actually changing that first shot. And it's super easy to do. And this is why it's so great to animate directly in the engine, because all of this is available to me on the fly. So I'm just going to simply open up that camera component, grab these clips, and I'm actually going to pull them over a little bit so I can see them right at the very front of my shot. And now what I want to do is I'm going to just pull back and look at this. It auto keyed it so I can see my robot. That robot's looking cool. A couple other things though that I might want to consider is on my robot itself. You know, it's not moving yet. Easy enough to retime. Drop this down. You notice I have a couple keys here. I'm going to simply drag these back, and now what I'm going to get, I'll pull it all the way back to the beginning so we can see it a little bit more. So now this guy moves, he's moving, looking good. Actually, I'm going to retime these a little bit more because I actually like what that's doing there, where that's kind of moving through. And you know, I can't see my character kind of doing their thing with their hand, so I'm just going to simply drag my animation clip over to a point where I like where that's doing. And there we go, moving the little hand. Looking good. So you can kind of see it's really fast and easy just to come in here and retime all this stuff. And that's kind of the cool thing about it. As I'm manipulating and moving these elements here in the sequencer, it's all real time. I don't have to jump back and forth between my various animation tool sets to make this work. So that's looking awesome. But one other thing I want to do here is back here, right here. You see I have this like explosion happening off back here. I want that to only happen when I get into view, right? So I don't want it to happen yet. So I'm going to do something really cool with this. I'm going to add that explosion to my sequencer. So I'm going to come over to my outliner and find this explosion. So if I select it, you'll see there it is. It's called Simple Explosion. I'm going to simply drag it down. And now this is a Niagara system, and that is important here. I can do some other things with some other types of emitters, but I want to make sure that I'm using this Niagara component for this. So I have that simple explosion added to my timeline, and you'll notice there's nothing really happening with it yet. So what I need to do is I need to select the little plus icon on the track here, and then I'm going to come over here where it says components. I'm going to add the Niagara component, and then on the Niagara component, I'm going to add another track. And on this one, I'm going to add the Niagara System Lifecycle track. And what this does is it gives me this little red bar. And the cool thing about this red bar is that wherever it is, that is where the system lifecycle is going to start. So for example, in here, boom, there we go. So the explosion happens and it goes off into space. And actually that looks pretty good. Maybe a little bit sooner. Maybe something as soon as we get into view, and there it is. So with that simple aspect, this starts to become a little bit more lively. It starts to build a little bit more life into my scene. Now, a couple other things that we want to do here. I have all these red lights in my sequence. Now, they don't make any sense to have the red lights on yet, do they? So what I want to do is I want to have the red lights only happen right here, boom, where that explosion happens. So let's go in here and try to add the lights to my sequence and see what happens. All we want to do is we're going to use one of these guys right here, this one, and I'll put it into playing maybe a little bit closer to my character so we can see it a little bit better, something like that, and that's perfect. So I'm going to grab this point light 5, drag it down into my sequencer, and there it is. So, and for due diligence, I'm going to just select these, hide them, select these and hide those as well, so we just see this red light. Now, what I have going on is right here, as my explosion happens, right there, now I want this light to really kick on. So I have a couple things going on. Right off the bat, the intensity on this light component, that's the thing that I'm going to start to animate. So I'm going to bring that intensity down to 0 to start, put in a key, and I'm going to simply move over a little bit, and then I'll bring that intensity up like crazy. Let's do 500, and that looks pretty good. And I start to get that red light. I actually might make that even a little bit higher, maybe 1,000, just so we can really see that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to left click and drag over these keys, copy them, scroll down a little bit, and paste them. And I'm going to just keep doing that just to make a little bit of a sequence. Now, I could do this with a blueprint as well, so I could actually activate a blueprint in my sequence and have that light kind of like start to flash like this, but this actually looks fine, and I think it works very well. Now, the next thing we want to do here is add a little bit more life to the camera. So the next thing we're going to take a look at is adding a camera shake. Now, I could do that in a couple different ways. If I wanted to, I could actually come into the Cinecamera actor, maybe go into the rotation here and add a bunch of keys and have that thing rotate around. But there's another way to do that, and that is simply by selecting the camera, the Cinecamera actor, selecting an add here, add a track, and we're going to add a camera shake. Now, I've already created a blueprint for this, so if you do not know how to use blueprints, we're going to go over that really quickly, but I just want to add this to show you what this will look like. So I'm going to scroll back on this guy here, just pull this all the way down to the end so you can see it. And now this is what we're going to get. So you can kind of see that camera has a little bit of life and it is moving. Now, one thing I might want to do is maybe right here, instead of having that camera shake happen the entire time, maybe I'll have that camera shake start just when that explosion happens. And I think that looks pretty good. So I'm happy with that. So how do we make a camera shake blueprint? So it's pretty easy. So I'm going to go ahead and save all of my sequences here. Pop over to my content browser, go back to content. And for this, I'm just going to go ahead and add it right in here. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to blueprint and I'm going to do blueprint class. And right now, open up all classes. And what I'm going to look for is camera. And I'm going to look for the, see if I can find it here a little faster, shake. And I'm going to look for the default camera shake base. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And I'm going to go ahead and select it. And there it is. And I'm going to call this Cam Shake 2. And now I'm going to double click it to open it. And in here, there's only a couple small things that I need to kind of address. I don't really need to do anything in here. What I'm going to look at over is in my details panel. And all I'm going to look for here is I'm going to open up the camera shake pattern. And I'm going to adjust a couple things here. Under rotation, I can adjust amplitude. I'm going to make it crazy. Let's go ahead and make it 50 and 50. And this is going to be nuts. I would not recommend doing this, but I just want to demonstrate what this will do. So add 50 and 50 for these as well. So this is the amplitude and the frequency for the location, and the amplitude and the frequency for the rotation. Now the duration of this I can change from 1. Could make this something like 10. It's pretty long. And then I have a blend in time and a blend out time at 0.2, and that's all good. So we'll go ahead and compile this and save. And then we'll drag this over here. So now if I pop back into my sequencer on this where I have my cam shake, I'm just going to swap that out. So a really cool thing about sequencer is also that when I have different components attached, I can right click and go to properties, and I can really quickly take these and just swap them out for different assets. So if you notice right here under my camera shake class, it's the initial one that I made. I'm just going to change it to cam shake 2, and there we go. So now, there you go. Whoa! So there you go. Remember I said that was too crazy? Careful, that was too much. But you get the idea. So I'm gonna go ahead and swap that back under properties, go down to my shake class, and just simply change that back to my old original one. And that looks pretty good. I'm happy with that little bit of movement. All right, let's finish this all off by putting in a few more cameras and working to create a camera cut track so we can actually have a multi-camera cut sequence. Let's add in a second shot. So let's go ahead and take our second camera, so this is our Cinecamera Actor 2. I'm going to select this and drag it down and drop it into my scene. And now you'll see I have a Cinecamera Actor and a Cinecamera Actor 2. So this is looking good. I'm gonna pull these guys both up to the top here so I can see them. And what I want to do on this is I'm going to come in here and we'll take a look at this camera. So there is my second camera. Let's pull this out of the way so we can see. So here's my second camera. If I select this, you'll see that it'll pilot in here. I don't actually want to do that here, so I'm going to actually turn that off. So now I need a good way to kind of work with these two cameras. So in this particular instance, I have Cinecamera Actor and Cinecamera Actor 2, but I don't have any way to kind of like tell the sequencer when to render each camera. So really easy way to do that. I'm going to go to Add, and then down here I'm going to add a camera cut track. And in here, in the camera cut track, what I can do is I can actually add in the various cameras that I have. So I'm going to go ahead and add, I'm going to do New Binding, Cinecamera Actor, there. Then I'm going to roll down here a little bit, and let's say, I'm going to click on this so I can see what it's doing. So this camera should be moving. Oh, actually I moved my animation so it won't work. There we go. So now this camera should be moving. Perfect. Boom, that explosion happens. and then we move out like that. And now maybe right here is where I would want to have my second camera in place. So I'm going to come in here to this little plus icon, new binding, add camera actor 2, and now there is my second camera. Now again, in here, what I might want to do is look at the second camera and say, oh, you know what? That second camera is not doing a whole lot for me yet. So let's go ahead and grab it and say, what do we want to do with this thing? So I'm going to go in here and rotate it around, and let's say pull it over here, something like that. Looking good. And that actually looks fine. So pop up, boom, and then I'm going to run. There we go. So there, that might be the entirety of my shot, and I like what that's doing. So I'm going to actually pull this end indicator down here. So pull it right about there. Oh no, I gotta go. And now I run off screen, and I'm happy with the way that's looking. So that's starting to look pretty good. So a couple cameras added. We're starting to rock and roll. A couple other things that I might want to explore as I'm starting to build out the rest of this animation. The very last thing that we're going to look at is down here at the end of my shot. I have this little ball, and I want that ball to light up. Now, I don't have my second animation clip in here yet, and that's okay, because for what we're going to do, I don't need to have that in place. I can actually just animate this and then fill it in later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the sphere. I'm going to add that right down here into my sequencer. And you kind of get an idea here. As I'm going through all these various processes, the main thing here is that anything in my outliner can be pulled down into my sequencer, and I can animate it from there. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at animating this material to actually glow as somebody touches it. And then the last thing we're going to do is open this little door. And then that is the bulk of our animation. Okay, so let's take a look at just animating our last two elements for this demo. So what I want to do here is on my sphere, I'm going to click on the little plus track icon, and I want to add the static mesh component in here. So when I add that static mesh component, it's actually going to tell the sequencer what I'm trying to do with this track. So I want to actually activate things on this static mesh component. So I'm going to add to the plus icon here. I'm simply going to add in here a slot default material for the material parameters. So when I add that in, what you'll see is I can now come in here and activate different elements of that material. So it's actually telling the sequencer to look at the material that's on that static mesh. It's looking at that default material that's on that static mesh. And all I'm going to do on here is activate the color, so the color glass on that. So when I come down into here, you'll see that the color glass is set to this white color. But what I want to do is at some point, I just want to animate that so it'll go from the color it is now to like a blue color. So let's go ahead and animate that so my red comes down and my green comes down, and now it is blue, and you can see it actually is changing that material color there. So that is a pretty easy way to kind of create a unique little animation here for that element changing. Now, the other thing I can do here is I can also kick this blue value up. I know it goes to 1 here and tells me it's all blue, but I can also kick that way up. So like, let's say 1,000. And that's going to be it's going to kind of give like way more emissive on that. So I have some emissive in that element, in that material setup anyway. So that's going to kind of get that to kind of like glow a little bit more as that element changes. Now the very last thing I want to do here is take this door and have it open when my character needs to run through it. And all I need to do on this is look at this animation here. And I'm just going to have that turn on and then have that door open. So I'm going to grab the door, and what am I going to do? I'm going to drag it down here. There it is. And I'm going to go into the transform for the door, go to the location, grab the right one, and I'm simply going to animate the Y on this guy. So there we go. Boop. And rock and roll. So now when that little ball changes color, it does it, and I'm happy with that. I can also adjust this if I needed to, make it a little sooner. Oh, that's a little too soon. It's okay. Just shrink that down a little bit. There we go. And I like what that's doing. So now, if I needed to come back in and do any other additional animations to this, everything is sort of set up for me inside of my sequencer. And again, the cool thing about this is now if I need to come in and kind of like change some of the way that my shots are working, I can easily select the viewport to camera, so I can actually see what my camera shots are doing. I can look at this and change those cameras at any time. So if I wanted to simply just pull these over and change those camera shots, look at that, it's doing it. And now I could come in here and let's say we do something like this just for the heck of it. I'm going to pop back here. I'm going to copy that shot and paste it. So now I go boom, boom, boom. So I can kind of go back and forth between these different elements. So it's a really quick way to kind of get a sense of what these shots are doing and kind of starts to really kind of work on my layout for animating this. So you can see, now I don't like what that's doing right now, but you kind of get the idea because I'm missing that little explosion. So kind of come in here and retime this. And that's all part of that camera cuts track that I activated earlier. And then I can just come in here and add these different elements. And at any time if I don't like one of these different shots, let's say I wanted to kind of cut to a third camera back here, I could easily do that by just creating a third camera. So actually I have one in here. Let's see if I can find that guy here. Here's my third camera actor. And that shot actually looks pretty good. So what I'll do is I will just bring it down into my sequencer. Boom, there it is. And now at any time that I want to maybe showcase that shot, select this camera cut, turn that on so I can see it. And now maybe something like at this point, let's go ahead and bring this down. I'm going to just copy and paste it. And now what I can do is I'm going to right click, go to properties, and I'm simply going to change the binding on this guy to that third camera actor. And there it is. So now it's going to cut and show that last shot. And again, the cool thing about this is at any moment, if I know that this camera, oh, look at that. I know my animation here is triggering. So let's actually change this binding to camera 3 so I can see that door open. And then this one will trigger back to camera 2. And now, boom, boom, boom. Now, I don't love the way that this cut is working, but this gives you the idea of how you can actually get in here and start to animate and set up a sequence to make it work, to kind of give you a sensibility for creating a really cool cinematic. And with that, we're going to call it a done day. Well, that wraps us up. Thank you for joining me for this exploration of just the beginning tools in Unreal that can be used to create cinematics, previs, or even in-game cinematics. This is just a broad overview of what can be done. I hope you can take a few of these ideas and start your own journey into Unreal's animation and cinematic tools.